Hello, and welcome back to Let's Play Planet Coaster. We're back here in Project Utopia for episode 4 of a very long continuing series here of me designing and building Utopia, which is the park based on 5 different sections based on kind of the quote-unquote evolution of humanity idea here. And we're still right now working on this first area of the park, excuse me, the Enchanted Forest. Now, every section of this part is going to include at least 2 minor rides and 1 major ride. The 2 minor rides being smaller stuff, essentially flat rides, as well as there being a larger ride, which in this case is a wooden roller coaster. In the last video, I remember we went ahead and we worked on the transfer track and some of the other work that was used on the main wooden coaster, as you can see kind of in that corner of the shot right here in the background. And now we're going to be spending a lot of time working on Pixie Station. Now, Pixie Station is kind of the small train station that's associated with this area of the park. There's going to be a train station in each. There's actually going to be 4 train stations, one in between the city area and the wasteland area, because the train really never has a really great mesh in either of those. So the current plan is to have one in the other 3 areas, and then one kind of in between those to give it a more, actually give some space in between the stations. So here you see that we're actually working on kind of the track layout of it. What the train ended up doing is after it crosses the river right next to the pathway, as you can see kind of in the background right there, there's the other station, flush between that'll be the station in the Main Street area of the park. Now the train's actually going to go kind of over that bridge here. It's going to kind of dip down and go under the pathwork in the Enchanted Forest. This kind of caused a problem because I was not really sure how much space I wanted and how deep I wanted the tunnel to go, things of that nature to kind of give it a realistic feel. And instead of building an actual man-made tunnel, I decided to keep it a full all-natural tunnel because again, this is the Enchanted Forest. You see me placing some, starting on some rock work here, starting to kind of give some theming to that area. And actually, a small part of this that creation was skipped, but that actually developed into a forest. So that area is actually, fully covered in trees and grass, and it was the area that I essentially used to help decide how I wanted to build forests for the rest of that section of the park, because a lot of forests were built for the other part, especially for the wooden coaster, which has been given the name Forest Lord. You'll see kind of now I'm go ahead and I'm actually making the queue line for Pixie Station. And again, all this is going to be completely covered in forest to kind of give it that lost in the woods kind of appeal here. Um, Real quick, you see me here place the entrance and exit for the other station there. And now you see me going ahead into actually building the physical body of the station. Now, a slight problem that I kind of had when I started looking at this was if you'll notice that the station is a little bit elevated, and I didn't really like the way that meshed with the environment. Kind of has that whole default Planet Coaster-y kind of look going on under the station there. So I wanted to give it some sort of like stone, some sort of something to mesh it with the environment. You'll see here that the problem I was kind of having though is that the walls obviously have automatic, because the building it works on the grid system, and when I worked on that grid system, it'll kind of go ahead and cut off and didn't really fit to the size I wanted. Luckily, the sandstone has this little piece that I just flashed on the screen right there. I'm just gonna fill the sides real quick before I go in and do the thin sides. You'll see that it has this little piece right here, and I went ahead and decided I want to use this piece because this is one of the pieces that allows that 3D rotation. I went ahead and used the 3D rotation to kind of actually place a few of them to get close to the train tracks, but not too close where it would be uncomfortable. I think that building train stations is something that kind of adds a new element to the park, because there are definitely some design decisions I have to consider when doing the train station. Like later, toward the very end of this video, you'll see me putting the roof on the train station, where I encountered the issue of, hey, I'm putting a roof over where the actual train engine's going to be stopped. And I don't really want that smoke going ahead and filling up, so I had to leave that part without a roof. So some of the small considerations like that make the train station different from building and designing a normal station just kind of make it more interesting and almost fun per se to really go ahead and design what this looks like. Now I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to start working on the pillars and kind of how I want to, if I wanted to have the station enclosed or not enclosed, or what I decided. And what I ultimately decided was to have an open station, because this is in fact the Enchanted Forest. So I found these steel pillars here, and I'm like, hey, I think these look pretty good. And they're actually what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna build an elevated roof here on top of these pillars. So yes, it will be covered roof and things of that nature. But at the same time, it also will have a more open feel because this is part of nature and this is the natural area. I also one thing that I'm doing for everywhere in this park is I am building a canopy over at least some part of the queue and essentially every ride in the park. I think this is something that's very common at theme parks. You see it in almost all parks, waiting for the ride, yada yada yada, waiting for the canopy, get away from the sun, get away from the heat. And I don't really have access to things such as fans and some of the more stereotypical theme park stuff but I do have access to these canopies, so I'm going to go ahead and put them wherever possible. And what I decided to do is after I used these steel pillars to kind of go up, I used wooden beams to kind of go across here. So I'm going to kind of build a skeleton for what I want this general structure to look like. And it's just going to be a very basic rectangle with a roof on top and then a middle beam going across. I think building structures like this is something, again, having that kind of open concept without having the physical walls and stuff like that is something that you see very common because it's also a lot cheaper than actually building a full building to have for your queue. It's just very nice to have a small kind of, um, what's the word? Kind of small kind of like frame that you can go ahead and put a roof on and put something to cover it up on. So as you see here, I'm kind of looking for the pieces. I'm trying to figure out how I want to put a roof up here. I think that definitely, as I've spent time working on this park, I've gained a lot of insight about how a lot of the in-game mechanics work. And I think what I'm probably going to do in the future is introduce some sort of how to build a building and Planet Coaster kind of concept, where I really want to go into detail and explain kind of the concepts of what a building is in Planet Coaster and how to use the 3D system to kind of help design these buildings to what you want and design them the way that you could actually use to help create any building or any type of scenario that you want. So, as I have decorated that forest over there, the other things that have gone on in the park recently is that development of the wooden coaster has come along nicely. The station of the wooden coaster has more or less completely been built, or has been at this point mostly built. So most of the actual physical buildings of that are done. There's the mansion on top of the haunted hill is done, besides some small wooden details that are to be added, and then the station and the transfer track buildings are also done. So the major step left with that is kind of going back, smoothing a few more of the track pieces, and then actually adding the woods to that area. But also, there's a lot of open space right now, especially you just kind of something quickly paint around there. There's a lot of open space still left in the Enchanted Forest, and there's 2 flat rides and a food court that need to be placed. I already have pretty strong ideas about what I want those to look like and how I want them to be themed and things of that nature. But I don't really have a definite plan about how they're done yet, and that will definitely be coming in later videos. Now you see me here. One thing that I've really had to struggle with is kind of these little one thing that's really gotten on my nerves, I guess is a better way to say it, are these structures here, the people working and the actual workers of Planet Coaster. So some of the entrance gates and stuff look real corny, and there's nothing you can really do to change that. Kind of grinds my gears a little bit because it doesn't really mirror a realistic setting or what a realistic entrance looks like. They all kind of have this Planet Coastery futuristic look. Well, I'm in the Enchanted Forest. I want this dude sitting in a tree or on a stump or something instead of like standing next to 2 metal poles with lights on them. And there are ways you can cover it up. I did a kind of a weaker cover up job for Forest Lord to kind of give it a some sort of like cover, some sort of like, hey, this looks more like it's actually woods. But, I don't think it was something that turned out like, oh my gosh, this looks fantastic. So, definitely something that's bothered me a lot about Planet Coaster. As you see, like the person in the station there, like he has his little booth that he works at, and there's not really much I can do to really make that booth look good. So you see here what I decided to do, because I didn't want to do the exact same, I was going to do the exact same structure that I did in the other one. I'm like, well, that's kind of boring. And so what I went ahead here is I went ahead and I decided that I was going to build this structure to be kind of like an extended I shape. So there's going to be a large middle beam and then have stuff going on the sides. One thing I really didn't consider with this is when the train comes in, the train is not only pretty close to the wooden structure. I don't think that's a major deal. I think that what I'm more worried about is how the locomotive is putting out a lot of smoke and steam, and stuff like that. I don't really want to accumulate, especially since I'm putting a roofing structure over it. And so, what I wanted to do was I actually ended up cutting in that. There's a kind of a square. The first block in the station is a square, so when the locomotive actually sits there, the smoke just goes straight up and does not get in the roof. So that's something that I do a little bit later. See me here putting a train here, testing, see what it looks like, and you see that I actually slightly notice that the smoke's coming up there, but I did not address it till after this video was made. Last thing you're going to see me do is actually go ahead and put the roof on here. Um, which I think is something that I just decided to essentially copy the roof and structure from the other one. And what another big thing element that I think actually ended up looking really cool for this park was the addition of ivy. So I think that Planet Coaster has a really good ivy system, really good element for ivy. So you put it on roofs, you put it on the side of buildings, it really gives it that nature look. So go ahead and put these roots on, and that's actually going to call it for this video. Thank you very much for listening and spending your time with me, and next time we will be starting to work into the other elements of the Enchanted Forest.